Now, finally, at the end of the last day, in our last 20 minutes, the thing I wanted you to understand the most, the owl. We talked about him before, but just to encapsulate him, here's three owls perfectly expressed, and this is in IYR, the U.S. real estate, and it happens to be on 1 minute charts. But now there was an unambiguous move from the first red dot to the green dot. That was a collapsing dragon, but that's also an unambiguous move. And now I want you to notice criteria one, unambiguous move on the way down. We have a P1 outside the, it's a P1, it's a RLCO outside the river. So there he is. Criteria three, the RL10 crossed the dragon, RLXD. The dragon rolls up, the 30 has rolled up. This second green dot is the owl entry. That's not the only trade that was available, but that's the owl. It's hard to see that as a turning point sometimes because of the power of the first unambiguous move. So there were 5 things that made it an owl, finally. The P1 in this case would have actually worked. Say, well, I could always use it. Yeah, but sometimes it fails. It fails often enough that the P1F is a good entry on the other side. The RLXD, the criteria 3, can be an exit. If I was doing those 2 entries, I just use the PSAR or the belly of the RL10 and you'd be happy with that entry. You didn't give back much by waiting for the owl, but sometimes you do, and you could be tempted to skip the owl and just, but if you do, make that a deliberate, intentional move. Don't increase the position size. Your execution R is smaller though. So explore that possibility and let your conscience be your guide. So the owl entry, that just gets met. Look how good the PSAR is all the way up. Or the southern skin of the dragon. Or the edge of the river all the way up. And then you get out when you get the RLXD or a 1, 2, 3 exit. That's how much more did you want? That's the owl. Now, the successful owl creates an unambiguous move the other way. And now here's the second owl that's available. We had an unambiguous move, check. We have a P1. This P1 outside the river here is still valid. We have an RLXD here. We have the dragon finally rolled over and the 30 finally rolled over. That's why this is an owl entry, but this one was not an owl entry. That was an RLXD entry on the short side. And if you had used the peak of the RLXD, you would have taken a execution R loss. But if you wait for the owl, the second time pays, the second time is the charm. That's the difference between an RLXD entry and an owl entry. Here's one where the RLXD entry worked. Here's one where the RLXD entry didn't work. Here's one where the owl worked. Here's another one where the owl worked. So sometimes the patience is worthwhile. So if you're going to use the RLXD entry, be mindful. Don't think, there's no more. There's more coming. It just, as long as your execution R is small compared to your position size, your R loss is small, and then your R capture is large when it works. Be small when you're wrong. Be large when you're right. You don't have to be right. You just can't stay wrong too long. Good mantra. You don't have to be right. You just cannot afford to be wrong too long. So that's 2 iterations of the owl. And now the exit on the other side was a 1, 2, 3 exit on the second owl. And notice the PSAR flip. That's an owl. Here's another set of owls, and now with the criteria marked off. Unambiguous move, P1, RLXD, dragon turns, 30 turns, enter at 6, exit at 9 on a 1, 2, 3 exit. Now, the pocket. So here's an owl. Now, the unambiguous move in this case is because there was a big adverse gap. So I treat the gap as if that was one big red candle. So the gap plus the initial sell-off is the unambiguous move. 2, there's a P1. 3 is the RLXD. And now, by the time the RLXD occurs, the dragon has turned and the 30 has turned. So this green dot is simultaneously the RLXD and the owl. There you go. Now, it got back above the Bollinger Band main, pulled back, and then started to resume. So it didn't fail back to the entry. It paused, and then the RLXD happens again. I want you to notice the RL10. It sold off and reversed. We had a positive owl. It pulled back. It never even penetrated the dragon, but then resumed. That makes this a pocket. In one way, you could look at this second green dot as a pocket formed by the elbow of the dragon. If you looked at that as an arm, that little safety zone inside here at 3, that looks like a pearl of great price, right? The dragon carefully protecting it and bracketing it and encouraging it higher. The dragon is your friend. When it's at the bottom of the river and makes a turn and you see that little pocket inside there, that's like a pearl. You might enter, you might just observe that as that third criteria, the RLXD, and buy the owl at 6. That's fine. But that's a pocket. And this second green dot is a pocket. This third green dot is a pocket. I say third, that should be 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 was a Z2 entry. It exceeded Z3, and I bought it at Z2. That made this one a pocket, and a pocket. So now what I have is 1 leg up, 2 legs up, 3 legs up. Man, that's unbelievable. 3 good legs. I see 1 leg. I plan for 2. I hope for 3. So the one I love is this one right here. This second pocket, because we had an unambiguous move. It got back to yesterday's gap. It didn't fail. I can use the red line as a stop just below the belly of the dragon. Enter here with a 20-cent risk, and it gave me 60-cent gain. I love this entry right here. So if you had a successful owl and then it didn't fail and it starts to resume, second position. Or if you had an owl and it was successful and this got you out, that's your re-entry at this green dot. Now here's the owl on the far side. Unambiguous move up, P1, RLXD, dragon rolls over, 30 rolls over. Your owl entry is at that moment of 5. If you didn't get in here, you could certainly get in here when it collapses below the Bollinger Band mean. I'd be willing to try a second position there on my best day. And if this little retracement got you out, you could re-enter here at this pocket and this pocket. And now you look at the extreme move from the 10 away from the RL270. There's actually an RLFF, and it came all the way back to long-term fair value. So now I'm combining these overlays and these lenses to look at RLFF inside the RLCO framework. I don't even have the MACD on that one, but you can imagine what that would look like. Here's one where we had an owl entry, the unambiguous move, cashed a hybrid frog, and then we had unambiguous move, P1, RLXD, the dragon rolls up, the 30 rolls up. I buy the owl at 6. And then I use this red line as the stop. When it's moved a certain distance, it's being supported by the VWAP. I raise my stop up following the long-term fair value. That is working all the way. I use the Z3 line in the quietude. I add a second position when it breaks out above this hump of the dragon. Second position feels good. Getting towards the end of the day, cash. Trade management, using different techniques and feelings and deciding where my stop was going to be, never lowering my stop, but always deciding how to increment my stop and decide how much I want to preserve. That's going to vary based on what the market was doing, the time of day, where my dollar captures are, and what the target is, all that jazz. But that's what the trade management approach looks like. Here's a couple different ways we might manage entry. So Maybe I tried a hybrid frog and it scratched, and I tried the continuation and that failed, and now I buy the owl. Unambiguous move, P1, RLXD, dragon rolls up, 30 rolls up, buy the owl, cash, yay. Re-enter here, scratch. Now I get short coming down. That's what that trade sounds like using pure tactical play. But I might have played on this owl, I might have said, I'm going to use the 30 as my stop. Okay. Or I might have said, let me take the Z2 line and just stay in this trade all the way up. So it's just one trade, and I never got in and out, but I'm just managing the trade with a relaxed position. That's a technique. So you get paid to study how to use different strategies for exits. Put your effort there. Figure out some way to get in, manage your risk, get to no lose plus dinner for two, then work on the strategy for exits that make sense to you, that reflect how active you want to be or how much room you feel it ought to have, and then you can study the R capture of these different exits. That's where you put your effort, not in trying to optimize and fine-tune the perfect entry, but work on the exits that resonate with you, that become reliable, robust, repeatable technique that you can develop.